Hey, what's going on, you guys? This is Madam. I'm coming back to you again. This is from the NewYorkTimes.com, and it says, did he kill Neva to become TikTok famous, or was it self-defense? Yes, one of the many first mainstream crimes that have come from being, wanting to be famous on TikTok, so to speak. This is about Zachary Ledham, and he says that he was defending himself when he fatally stabbed William Durham. Mr. Durham's family said he had another reason. Okay? Zachary is 18 years old and he's being charged with manslaughter and the killing of his neighbor, Mr. William Durham of South Jersey. Okay? The article was done by Ed S. And the article starts off by saying that Zach Ledham and the Durham family were South Jersey neighbors who did not get along. Ultimately, their conflict turned fatal. The dispute centered on Mr. Ledham's driving. The Durhams, William Sr., his wife Kathleen, and their two sons thought he was recklessly at the wheel, and they confronted him about it more than one time, according to the family's lawyer. Their encounters, which Mr. Lenaham filmed in videos that he posted online, becoming especially charged in April. In one, he taunted Mrs. Durham. He said she was a Karen after she complained about his driving. A TikTok video on the episode that Mr. Ledham posted has been viewed more than 3 million times. The tensions erupted in a bloody clash on May 4th, the authorities said. When it was over, Mr. Durham, a 51-year-old corrections officer, was dead, and Mr. Ledham, an 18-year-old National Guard private, had been charged with killing him. Man, this is crazy. Now, Mr. Durham's family is accusing Mr. Ledham of committing the slaying to become TikTok famous, even as they also face charges for their own role in the deadly altercation. In addition to the charging Mr. Ledham with manslaughter and other crimes, the Cumberland County prosecutor charged Mr. Durham and his sons with assault and trespass. In a news release announcing charges, the prosecutor, Jennifer Webb McRae, did not say who started the fight or why, but each side blamed the other in a tangle of conflicting of accounts. At a court hearing in May, Nathan Perry, Mr. Ledham's public defender, called the killing a horrific tragedy. NY.com reported. Still, Mr. Perry said his client acted in self-defense to the very, very fair extent the Durhams visited this great sadness upon themselves. Okay? So, at the time of the hearing, according to the court filings, Mr. Perry said the Durhams were viewed Mr. Ledham as the James Dean of the neighborhood. He drove too fast and his car was too loud, Mr. Perry told the court. And they resolved in their minds that they're going to fix his wagon. They're going to straighten him out. The Durham's lawyer, who want the charges against their client dropped, and Mr. Ledham's charges with first-degree murder, have been provocated theory for what happened. Mr. Ledham's, they said, deliberately drew Mr. Durham to his death in a bid for social media celebrity. In a June letter to Miss Webb McRae, the lawyer Diane M. Ruperston and Robert E. Simmons noted that Mr. Lanahan's wife, Sarah Lanahan, recorded the brawl on her phone and said she did so because it was her and Lanahan's intent to post these videos to TikTok and become TikTok famous. This is crazy. For the reason the lawyers argued, the self-defense claim does not hold up. If Lanahan was in fear for his or Sarah's safety, they both would have retreated inside, called the police, and stayed there, they wrote. They did not because their intent was to lure the Durhams there, attack them, and record it for TikTok. In the letter, which was first reported by NJ.com, the lawyer recounted what they said were the results of their inquiry into the events preceding and surrounding Mr. Durham's killing. Their interaction began when Mr. Durham approached Mr. Lanham not long after the teenager moved into his grandparents' home on Thorhill Road in Vineland, about 40 miles south of Philadelphia, to complain that he was driving recklessly. Mr. Lanham, who was 16 at the time, came to the Durham's home later to apologize, the letter said, but he continued to drive erratically. After receding for a time, the tensions resumed around April when prosecutors said in the court filings, Mr. Lanham and Mr. Durham became embroiled in a powder keg of an escalating feud. Among the incidents that occurred then was the confrontation between Mr. Lanahan and Mrs. Durham that earned 3 million TikTok views. Users who commented on the video, the Durham's lawyer wrote, suggested he should cut her tires, egg her house, and go after her. Several days later, the lawyers wrote, Mr. and Mrs. Durham were outside their house doing yard work. Then Mr. Lanham pulled up and yelled, "Hey, Karen, we went viral." The Durhams, their lawyer wrote, sought help from the Vineland police several times, but were repeatedly told they could not sign a complaint against Mr. Lanham since the courts were closed because of the coronavirus pandemic. The Vineland Police Department did not respond to a call seeking comment. On May 4th, their lawyer wrote, the Durhams confronted Mr. Lanham after he strewed his pickup truck at their 17-year-old son, who was riding his bike. Mr. Lanahan said he honked the horn at the boy, but did not swerve in his direction. Later in the day, the lawyer wrote, Mr. Durham pulled his truck into the street to block Mr. Lanahan's truck. Mrs. Durham recorded the exchange on her phone, challenged Mr. Lanham over the incident involving her son. Video footage shows Mr. Lanham throwing an elbow at Mrs. Durham, pushing her back, knocking the phone from her hand, and speeding off home. The prosecution filing says 2 friends were in the bed of Mr. Lanahan's truck at the time. When Mr. Lanahan got to his house, his wife, who was recording the scene with her phone, walked down the driveway to confront the Durham's son as they came onto the property, the prosecution filing says. This is a pretty long one, y'all, so Miss Lanahan told the Durham son, the filing says, that they had better back up because they were not going to like what's coming out of the house. Mr. Durham soon arrived in his truck. Mr. Lanaham's public defender said in the filings that he and his wife can be heard on the video footage clearly telling the Durhams several times to get off their property. They are not welcome. The prosecution filing also says Mr. Lanahan issued such a warning. The Durhams, their hands visibly empty, continue to approach the prosecution filing says, and Mr. Lanahan fired a stun gun and swung a knife at one of the Durham sons. Mr. Durham then grabbed at him, Mr. Lanahan, who slashed him in the right arm with the knife before retreating into the garage, following by his friends. And Mr. Durham prosecution filing says, a brief but violent melee then ensued, during which the stun gun was fired repeatedly at Mr. Lanahan's wife, urged him to drop the knife. The prosecution filing says Mr. Durham was stabbed under his armpit, puncturing his lung in what was thought to be a fatal wound. The filing says Mr. Perry, Mr. Lanahan's lawyer, did not respond to requests for comment on the suggestion that his client had lured Mr. Durham to his death in hopes of gaining social media notoriety. Mrs. Webb McRae declined via email to comment on the claim. In a letter responding to the Durham's lawyer, she wrote that the information they had shared with her office would be taken into consideration as to advising you as to what additional charges will be pursued against Mr. Lanham. Mrs. Webb McRae wrote, that will happen at this time. Mr. Lanahan is out of jail until his trial begins, which could be sometime next year. As for whatever the charges against the Durhams would be dropped at this time, she added that will not happen. Okay? So it's a lot going on. You have this young National Guard and fighting with his neighbor. I wonder if his TikTok is still up. I'm not sure, but he is a private. Damn, he's still like a baby for real. Like, oh goodness. But anyway, he just doing the most for what? Now you looking at manslaughter, possibly first degree murder. I mean, if they prove that you lured that man out to do that to that man, bruh, I don't know how that's gonna work out for you, but that's crazy, bro. But then you recorded it for TikTok. All fame ain't good fame. All notoriety ain't good notoriety. Okay? So, this is the story that I have for y'all today. I apologize, it was a bit long, but I got through it. You got through it, hopefully. And thank you for staying to the end of the video. Please don't forget to drop down and comment, and don't forget to like this video. And I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. I hope you got a lot of things planned. You know, it's going to be a very good weekend. So until then, you guys, talk to y'all.